Whatever happened to the hole in the ozone? If you were like me and were born before the mid-90s, you probably heard about the hole in the ozone. The ozone being an important layer in the atmosphere that protects us from most of the UV exposure from the sun. Without it, surface UV levels go up, harming plant and animal species, including us. So, in the latter half of the 20th century, the hole in the ozone was a common area of concern, more so than even climate change, and comparable to acid rain in public perception of environmental hazards. I was born in the early 90s, so I remember hearing about it when I was really young, but then concern for it just kind of vanished. No one talks about it anymore. Same with acid rain, it's just never something that comes up. Is this a case of the ozone hole being overhyped and concern for it just kind of went away when people stopped caring? Well, no. In 1976, the United States Academy of Science compiled research and found credible evidence to support a notion that had been circulating for some time now that the ozone was being depleted. The idea can be tracked back to observations in the 1950s showing seasonal reductions of Antarctic ozone. This wasn't good, and the culprit was found to be, by and large, a class of industrial chemicals known as chlorofluorocarbons, or CFCs, as well as related compounds. These were commonly used in aerosols, as refrigerants, and blowing agents in manufacturing, meaning we were just simply dumping large amounts of this into the air every year. Scientists are good at doing their job, but they are often very bad at public relations and disseminating information to the wider public, so this requires the media to be a middleman. And we all know how well that usually goes. Anyway, as public concern grew, both valid and imagined, this spurred pressure to start being placed on governments and industries to do something about it. Some countries started to phase out or even ban the use of CFCs in most products. The halocarbon industry, who manufactured CFCs, were very much against this and felt increasing rates of cancer, cataracts, and famine were less important than their bank accounts. Like how the tobacco industry felt that cancer was less important than their bank accounts. Or the lead and petrochemical industries feeling that poisoning the air was less important than their bank accounts. Or Exxon feeling that reducing the chances of long-term human survival were less important than their bank accounts. Or Coca-Cola allegedly hiring Colombian death squads to kill at least 10 trade union members between 1990 and 2002 to protect their bank accounts. It truly is a tale as old as bank accounts. The halocarbon industry complained, but more countries still started to ban and reduce CFC usage. In 1985, 20 nations signed the Vienna Convention for the Protection of the Ozone Layer. Then, in 1987, building off this framework, 43 nations met up in Montreal and signed the Montreal Protocol. This treaty banned many CFC products and phased out many more. The American chemical company, DuPont, did not like this and tried to stop all these nations from valuing human life over their bank accounts. They did not succeed. The two ozone treaties also hold the distinction of being the first universally ratified treaties in UN history. This also set a tone for future atmospheric treaties such as the Kyoto Protocol and Paris Agreement, both of which made our friends in the oil industries very mad because nothing makes them angrier than valuing human life over their bank accounts. Throughout the rest of the 80s and 90s, CFC production started to get phased out, shut down, and alternatives replaced them without the public really noticing a difference. Much like when ethanol was used to replace tetraethyl lead in gasoline, basically no one noticed, but they were no longer being poisoned every minute of every day. By the mid-90s, ozone levels had stabilized and started to trend upwards. In 2019, the ozone hole was at its smallest it has ever been since being discovered in the 1980s. Projections now put the full restoration of the ozone between 2045 and 2070. Large volcanic eruptions cause temporary decreases in ozone, however the long-term trend is still upwards as human CFC emissions have been greatly reduced and continue to be phased out where they are still being used. Acid rain suffered a similar fate, with controls on sulfur dioxide and nitrogen oxide emissions greatly reducing instances of acid rain in many parts of the world. So the reason we no longer hear anyone sounding the alarm on the ozone hole isn't because it wasn't real and people forgot, or it was some conspiracy and the alien reptiles in control changed their tactics to other fake issues. The reason we don't hear about the ozone hole anymore is because we solved it. We came together as a planet and unanimously agreed that cancer and cataracts are not fun and did something about it. We created a problem by accident and we fixed the problem intentionally. The damage we caused is now self-repairing. It's similar to how Y2K was no big deal and everyone looks back on it as a silly, overblown hype, and although aspects of it were overblown, the threat to computer systems was actually very real. It passed as a largely uneventful time due to years of hard work by a lot of people around the world. The hole in the ozone fell out of public consciousness because we actually did something about it. It's generally better for a disaster to be viewed as overhyped because the worst things didn't happen thanks to people preventing them. I would much rather we cut carbon emissions and use geoengineering to prevent the worst of climate change and have people believe it was overblown than let Florida become a coral reef and get to say I told you so. Because human life is more important than my bank account or personal validation. If you ever need a positive reminder that we can make a difference and prevent poor global outcomes, remember the ozone is healing because we chose to do something about that issue.